Star Soldier, a strange and evil presence is lurking in space, crushing everything in its path, destroying spaceships full of innocent people. The brutal Starbrain is threatening the entire Galactic Empire. Welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Sam.
And guys, I need to say that I was listening to a past episode, and one time I didn't say chronological, I said pronological or probological. I didn't say it, and nobody called me out on it, and it's in the episode. I'm not going to say which one, but I'm a little upset with you guys. Because Mike, I've been saying this for 150 plus episodes, and you guys didn't notice?
We have a private group chat where we talk about this shit.
You say the wrong word all the time. Like, you want us to call you out every time you do that?
I say this wrong word like every 5 minutes on this show. You're right. I'm really bad at that.
You almost did it right there. You almost started that
we
wrong
still
with
love
an S
you,
a second ago.
But it also means that I'm not gonna hound you on it.
Well, it's 1989 for those of you that are keeping score. We're on episode 3 of 1989, and when it's that early in the game, you're like, hey, another year, maybe this one won't be filled with shmups. Nope.
Wrong you
Star
are.
Soldier, here we are. Guys, Star Soldier is a game that is apparently based off of Star Force, a game that we reviewed a long time ago in 1987, which Joe gave the opinion that it was so simple, but that was a good thing. Joe, do you think you still stand by that?
You know, I was thinking about that earlier when I revisited Star Force. I guess I more meant that it was simple enough that it's just like the essence of shmups. So I get shmups in general aren't my thing, but I get why people might just want to play something that's like, oh, here's the base of all shmups. So I mean,
yeah,
kind of. Sort of.
I think I made the joke that it was like on the factory shmup floor. This was the one that didn't get any of the bells and whistles to make them any different. But this was just the template shmup.
Yeah, this is the economy model.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of how I still feel about that game.
You know, I went back and revisited it just for a minute or two. It is not exciting. It's true that it really is as bare bones as we're describing it here. Yet this time around, I did find that somewhat satisfying in the sense that it's really fun if you're just trying to play it for like mindless shmup practice of being able to dodge enemies and shoot enemies down and stuff like that. It didn't necessarily like change my opinion about the game at all. I just noticed what Joe was talking about this time, where it's like, yeah, I mean, it's really simple and it's missing anything that would make it unique, but in a certain way, like, it's kind of interesting to have something that just is like, this is the genre of the game. You know, like, imagine if Super Mario Brothers didn't have anything other than just jumping and platforms to land on, but you'd be like, you know what, I'm still okay with that. Like, it still is in the Super Mario Brothers engine, you know, it's just missing a lot of the interesting stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, and in the context of a shmup, I guess the other thing I was thinking was that it's because there were no power-ups, which I do think, for me personally, is a negative. If you're really good at shmups, you could see it as like a way to just... The only way you can get further in this game is purely on skill. So, like, I mean, I guess that can be seen as a plus, depending on what you're looking for.
I think that's a little too... I think it's giving it too much credit. But we're not here to talk about Star Force. I don't think that removing features is how to make a better game by default.
I mean, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just
no,
saying.
I don't think you're saying that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it sounds like you're describing a utility application instead of a video game.
I would say, though, that to Joe's point there, like, it is kind of interesting as a skill thing. It's something you would see as a difficulty mode on a better game, you know, like something that just removes all the things that might help a player, right? You can kind of go into the debug mode, if you will, and say like, okay, turn off all power-ups, turn off all lives and stuff like that. Like, I'm just gonna go into this and see how long I can survive. Star Force definitely offered that to the player. That's not very interesting for us, and it's not very interesting like in modern gaming, but it's kind of neat to think of like an arcade game that said, you know, the only thing you have to do is dodge and shoot. Like, that's the whole entire game. As Sean mentioned, though, we are here to talk about Star Soldier, a game only loosely based on Star Force. I don't want you guys to think that it's like, this is a sequel. It's not. It's just, this Star Force must have sold well, and they were like, how can we get this to be a better, more interesting shmup? And they came up with Star Soldier. In this one, the player pilots the starship Caesar, traveling through space stations occupied by powerful supercomputers known as Starbrains, who threaten the Galactic Empire. Couple questions here. First off, does every starship need a name? Like the Vic Viper in Gradius, and then like here we have Caesar. Would you think that like, you know, like, oh, this game has no personality if the ship doesn't have a name?
I think we're in like an age of like iconic spaceships. The Millennium Falcon. You know, I think they want to give it a recognizable name for that reason. Yeah, the Enterprise.
And if we're just gonna go by like, do ships have names? I mean, like, I think every boat has a name unless it's like a canoe or something. So it all kind of makes sense.
Yeah, every spaceship has a name too.
Yeah.
But you were never calling yourself Caesar or having any kind of identification with Caesar, right? Like that's just a thing in the manual, and then you completely disregard that information, right? You don't think of this. You don't think of Caesar like you think of Mega Man.
No, for sure. But it's also like, I think that this is another one of the situations where it may as well be a direct sequel. Like, there's nothing. It's not like there's a completely different plot line going on here. You're still shooting things in front of you. So, to me, this is a direct sequel.
The powerful supercomputers known as Starbrains, who threaten the Galactic Empire, that's straight from the manual there. I thought the Galactic Empire would be considered something that's bad to begin with, like they're evil, and then you have the Starbrains also being evil, taking down another evil, or is this like a friendly Galactic Empire? Can a Galactic Empire post Star Wars episodes 4 through 6 be considered good?
I see, like, you're in the Caesar ship, and it's the Empire, so I kind of see, like, Roman Empire connotations in that.
I love that.
Yeah, it really just depends on your personal view on whether imperialism is a good or bad thing.
Yeah.
And the game makes no political comment towards that. It doesn't say whether the Empire is good or bad.
It challenges the player to make that distinction.
Yeah, read into our apolitical work here. This is a think piece.
I think we can all agree that what they're trying to say is, regardless, humans can be good and bad, but computers can only be bad. So supercomputers called Starbrains must be really bad.
Because they're like trying to be humans, and that's our thing.
Yeah. You can't have a brain.
Yeah.
It was bad enough in Planet of the Apes. I can't imagine it here with supercomputers. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of the game, and that is the whole idea of what a shoot 'em up is. In my opinion, it's all about, you know, dodging and shooting and how that controls and stuff like that. So just gut reaction. Did you have a good time playing this, just in the sense of how it controls and how you feel as Caesar?
I mean, Sean? The controls are tight. It's pretty fluid. You know, the better you do, the faster you are. So that feeling gets better the better you play. Other than that, there really isn't too much more regarding the controls that I can say about it.
Yeah, I'll say I had more fun with this than I did with Star Force, where I think they both controlled pretty well, where Star Force didn't have really any bells and whistles. This added maybe like a bell and a whistle. So that was nice.
Yeah, I think that the movement and the control is pretty good. One thing, I guess I can elaborate a little bit, that I thought was interesting, I don't really know if I like it or not, but it was interesting, is that there's 3D space in this, and in that you can go underneath certain parts of terrain and then resurface.
I'd love to talk about that, yeah.
Certain parts of terrain, which I think is cool. It's a cool way to escape enemies for a second.
So go further into that, Sam, because it is a pretty unique mechanic where if you're on the above part of the terrain, you can attack everything and you can be killed by anything. But if you manage to glide under this surface, your ship will not be visible, but you also can't attack anything and can't be attacked by anything. So it's kind of like this stealth part of a shmup where you have an infinite dodge, but it's not necessarily useful because enemies continue to surround them. What did you think about that in terms of actual gameplay? Like, on paper, it sounds great, but how did it work in the game?
I wasn't a huge fan of it for the most part. There were some parts that got a little crazy, so it was nice to duck underneath. But I also noticed that during those crazy parts, there's usually one of those power-ups or one of those items that clears all the enemies on the screen anyway, somewhere on the screen, that you can't shoot if you're underneath the main stage of the game. So I think it's an interesting option that you can, if you know that it only works when you approach things from the bottom. Like, I don't think you can go to the side underneath something. I think whatever the trigger is...
That was going to be my point, because I would just randomly do this, and I had no idea how I was triggering this event. Like, I totally understand that this is like a risk-reward sort of thing, in that if you don't want to take the risk, you're going to give up the reward of those power-ups on the top, and to use it as like a quick escape, I'm totally for that. I think that's a cool twist to shmups, but I don't know how I was doing it. I don't know if there was like a specific direction that I was going, because I'm pretty sure that I did go in from the side a couple times, and I don't know if it's like because I wasn't holding a directional button down, or because I was holding a direction button down. I just couldn't get a handle on how it worked.
See, it's funny because I felt like it was forced for me. Like, I felt like no matter what, if I went into these little holes that they put on the, what would you even call what you're fighting through, right? It's
terrain.
Like if you imagine them as terrain, right?
Yeah.
If there's holes in them. I felt like once I enter that hole, even if I didn't mean to, I was now forced to either the bottom or top part of the level, which kind of kills the risk reward section of it, because it'd be really cool if this was actually mapped to an input like, say, the B button, right?
Yeah, because they're already duplicating the shoot button, so they could have just been something like if you hold this down, you will go under.
And then you get to choose, actually, like, okay, I want to be away from all of this, knowing that when I come back up, there will be possibly more enemies, or I won't be able to come out of a good spot. Like, I'll come out and I'll be right in the middle of all the action. But being able to choose that, I think, would have been more meaningful, because by the fact that it's forced, there's a lot of times where I actually didn't want to be underground, and it left me worse off. Not underground, but like on the lower half of the stage. Yeah. It left me worse off because when I come back up, there's a lot more happening on screen. Yeah, you're surrounded, and you're more likely to die, which in a game like this, with not that many power-ups, but there's power-ups, is kind of devastating, because you might have a great thing going, and then you don't.
Yeah. So I did try and test what the trigger was, just by like playing the same part of the first level over and over again. And I'm still not certain, but it seems to me like there's literally just certain points of these surfaces that you go under and certain points that you go over every time that you hit those points. Like almost as if the surfaces are slanted, or like some parts of the surfaces are higher, but they're designed in a way that when looking at them from the angle that we were looking at them, you can't tell. So I thought that was kind of weird. Because there's no indication as to what parts you're behind and which parts you're in front of until you fly into them. I don't know, it's a little strange. But also to the point that you were making, Mike, about coming out from underneath and being surrounded, I agree that was not ideal. But when I noticed that when I had the full power-up where you're firing in all directions, rapid fire in all directions, it was a little satisfying of like hiding underneath and coming out and be like, aha! And just all of a sudden you're an explosion of firepower in all directions. But if you don't have all those, then it's definitely troublesome.
And I think we've talked about in a previous Shmup episode, thinking like, it is kind of weird that you're on the same exact plane level as every single enemy. Like, we were joking about that obviously it's a 2D game, and, well, if there was some depth to it, that would be kind of cool, because it's weird. Oh, it was 1943 we were talking about, how, like, it's so strange that you're, all the planes are exactly where you need to line up with. But now seeing it in practice, I don't know if I'd want, like, 5 different levels of Z-axis on a 2-dimensional game where I have to, like, constantly shift up and down between these different platforms of the terrain to take down all the enemies.
No,
especially
I don't
in one that auto-scrolls.
Well,
I think that even when we were talking about it then, like, I think in a 2D game like this, that would never have worked.
what was the name of the space sim that we played?
Star Voyager.
Star Voyager. I guess that would be answering the question of what would that look like on the NES.
Yeah.
And it looked chaotic.
I just played that accidentally because I thought that, Mike, you told us that this one is going to be related to Star Force, and then I misremembered what you told us as Star Voyager. So I played Star Voyager and then realized I was supposed to be playing Star Force. This is not like Star Voyager. I don't know why I'm going on this weird aside.
So in this game, there are power-ups, and the way that the power-ups work is that you can only collect the same kind of power-up, and it just incrementally boosts you from having a single shot to a double shot to a double shot with a single backward shot, which is, like, kind of funny because it reminds me how often I just hang in the back of the screen, which is not, like, a good thing for a shmup. Like, you shouldn't really hang out in the back of the screen, especially if you have a shot that fires from behind, because then you're not using your full power. But we'll get into that in a second. I think that's a different question there. To continue on with the power-ups, then there's the ultimate weapon that Joe was talking about, where you shoot in, like, all, 8 directions or 6? Okay, it's 8. You shoot in all those directions, and that feels really good and really powerful. I just can't help but feel like the fact that the power-up is just like that S bar that just kind of floats around and you collect it, and then it just continues to advance up as you advance up. I couldn't help but feel like that wasn't really that exciting and removed the choice aspect of power-ups that we liked so much about Gradius and Life Force. I'm not saying they had to make it a choice selection thing where you actually have to go into a menu or hit the select button to choose the current power-up, but it did feel less exciting that it was all just so linear, and you just have to collect these power-ups and they just gradually make you the next natural stage of stronger. What'd you think, Sean?
Because it's just, like, more guns. Like, the only direction you can go in terms of how powerful you get. I know you can also be a little faster, but that comes with more guns. If you have a turbo button, that makes this entire game trivial. Because it's just, like, always spewing out bullets. There's no cooldown. It doesn't. There's no reason not to. And if there was a power up that maybe changed in a more meaningful way the way that you are offensively playing the game, it would make it so that, like, oh, just because I have turbo, that makes this game so much easier. I think that was sort of a problem for it.
I think it's just lame also.
What makes it lame, Sam?
Well, it's just we've seen other games that show really interesting kinds of power-ups. Like, what's the one that's not Gradius that we liked more than Gradius?
Life Force.
Life Force that we just played. Yes, thank you. They have the laser beam. They have, like, the wave beam. They have all these different interesting ways of making thoughtful gameplay, which I think is what's missing from this. Where it's just, all right, now it's just easier, instead of, like, which one do you think is best for this situation right now? You don't get that at all.
Exactly.
And I think that goes in line with also the fact that most enemies are one-hit kills, and then there's, like, the cliche, like, couple of bigger enemies that need a couple more hits, but there's also only one boss in the game, too, so there's never any thought about which power-up you need. You just hope you have the most advanced set at all times, because it's always going to help you to have more coverage when you're shooting. So I think like it was nice to have power-ups compared to Star Force, but we're not comparing this game to just Star Force. We're comparing it to all the NES shmups we've played, and by now we've gotten pretty used to some pretty like interesting, unique shmup power-ups that it feels like this one is actually like 2 steps backwards, because, you know, that whole like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, because yes, it's better than Star Force, but it's not doing a lot in terms of power-ups on NES games.
You know, the funny thing I just kind of realized is that like the biggest criticism of Star Force is that it's just sort of like a basic like template of a shmup, and it's almost like they said, oh, you want like a progressive you want like a progression of power-ups? Well, here's the most basic progression of power-ups we can possibly think of. And it's like they made almost a similar mistake again.
No, it's the same thing. They're definitely like 2 or 3 years behind everybody else making shmups right now. And I never thought that we would become authorities on shmups, but now we are the connoisseurs. And whether we enjoy playing them or not, we can taste the difference between whether this shmup has an oaky flavor to it or not. And these are just, you know, they would be very badly gridded wines.
It's certainly no Scoon.
It's no Scoon.
Which again, like, is an interesting point, because Scoon actually took you to an interesting location of a shmup, right? Like, it actually made a submarine style shmup. I'm down with that. Mm-hmm. I'm not so on board with seeing space again, only nothing is that interesting.
Yeah. Also, can we talk about the bosses?
Yeah, let's talk about those supercomputer bosses, Starbrain and Super Starbrain. They have, one of them looks like an NVIDIA GPU card. Did anybody get that feel?
Yeah, I guess so.
Super Starbrain looked like that to me. And
all those
the only thing I
fans.
want to... Yeah, the only thing I want to mention is with the Starbrain characters is that they only pop up at the end of the levels. They hype it up as like a big boss, like prepare for Starbrain or whatever. And then there's like a time limit to the boss where it's like, oh, if you don't beat this thing in time, you get warped back like slowly to the beginning of the level. And I wish it was actually cool and you saw all the damage you had done, but clearly no NES game is going to show you that. So instead, they just warp you back to the beginning. And you have to do the whole stage all over again just for another shot at taking down Starbrain. It's not like you took you took 1/3 of his health bar. Now you got to go back for the other 2/3. It's like, no, you just have to restart the level because you didn't do it in time. Sam, what did you think of the supercomputer Starbrain?
I thought it was lame. I thought that it was just, I mean, he had one little bubble gun that kind of wobbles a little bit, and then a just single bullet that comes out, and it's the same fight every time, and all you have to do is just shoot it in the middle, and then that's how you beat it. And with Super Starbrain, it has cannons that you can take out, but it's the same thing. You just have to shoot it in the middle, and there's not really...
Wait, I didn't have to take out those little, like the fans on the graphics card before I took out the big fan?
I wasn't sure.
You do have to do that.
You do.
Oh,
have to do that.
Okay. Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. Like, I hear what you're saying. They missed the moment. They missed the memo because Gradius has that whole like shoot the core thing, which has become synonymous with a lot of these shoot 'em ups. But they also gave you a real boss before that happens. You know, like the shoot the core thing is just like a fun thing at the end where you have to like beat precision and dodge at the same time. This isn't so much about precision and dodging, because if I remember correctly, Starbrain will actually like lock you out of the center if you're not going for the center. So you kind of have to be chilling where his hitbox is if you want to do any kind of damage on him. So you have to kind of play ball. There is no dodging. There's just like being conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is so much fun.
It's not what I look forward to in a game. Especially with these shmups, you know, like half the skill is dodging, but for the boss fights, right? For them to just be a larger sandbag like enemy where it's just, okay, more shots to the center, but it pretty much only shoots straight on and only has 2 attacks. That's no different from like a normal enemy in this game. I'm so real enemy.
Yeah.
So different from a normal enemy in this game. So I'm not quite sure what made Starbrain the threatening force that they expected him to be based on the manual in the back of the box. Like, I didn't get that impression when I saw him on screen.
Yeah, I actually felt like when you got to the boss, it was a little bit of a break from the level. I mean, not that the levels were ridiculously hard either, but the brain felt easier than the level for like at least the
that's
most
the
of
breather.
The time.
The boss is the breather.
But I hated that it didn't even. Maybe it was in the manual, but you had no indication that there was a time limit. So I'm the first one. I'm just like taking my time, trying to get the target, but trying to dodge and everything, not knowing that I'm being timed. And then I just get meticulously sent back to the beginning of the level. They make me watch myself get sent all the way back to the beginning of the level.
It does mention it in the manual, but it does not tell you like how much time you have. There's no indication that you're running out of time. So
yeah, and then once I mean, granted, I only played I think 10 stages. Or maybe 8 stages, but once you know the time limit, I never had any problem with the time limit. It's usually pretty easy to defeat these things in under whatever the limit is.
Well, we're talking about like advancements from Star Force, and I don't know if when you guys were replaying this, you got to the boss battles in Star Force, but they're hilarious. Like I actually completely wiped this from my brain, but they're like 3-second boss fights where as long as you have your dual weapon. If you shoot on that thing and there's like turrets shooting at you, but the actual boss does not shoot at you, you can take that thing down in 2 to 3 seconds. And I thought that was really funny because I had just finished my Star Soldier playthrough and was like, oh, let me see what Star Force is all about. And I was like, wow, it was even easier then. So I don't know if the complaint with Star Soldiers is that it's too easy. I think the complaint is that there's just not really a lot going on in this game. Mm-hmm. Is that what you guys are thinking?
Simple.
That's
too simple,
it,
not necessarily too easy.
Yeah.
In fact, I thought that it was a nice level of manageable in during the levels itself of like when projectiles are coming at you. At least for me, maybe it's just because I'm not good at these games. But I mean, I know a lot of shmups. Sometimes I'm just overwhelmed. There's too many things. I can't keep my eye on everything. Here, it felt like not super easy, but not impossible at any points. So that was the one thing, like difficulty I thought was fine. It was the simplicity that got boring and repetitive.
I completely agree with that because I think this is some of the best sets of like enemy patterns we've seen in terms of fairness where there's not like this random smorgasbord of many different characters on the screen, many different enemies on the screen that will just go zigzagging every which way and you'll be in like a bullet hell. That doesn't really exist in this game, but there are some interesting patterns where they come in from the sides and then they zigzag across or they make a circle.
Yeah.
I think, but again, like in a way, because it's so controlled, right? And because it's so like, it's almost like Galaga, where like they all come out as a fleet. Because it's like that, it actually does make the game a fair bit easier than the shmups we're used to on the system.
Yeah, I will say that the enemy I did feel like there was a good. I'm not sure if this is what you were saying. Maybe I missed it, but I did think that there was a good amount of enemy variety. Like that smorgasbord. I feel like it existed, but it sounds like you were saying they didn't come out all at once. But there was a lot.
Like there are enough like different patterns. I mean, like the enemies themselves, like the designs are just kind of different oblong shapes. So I don't quite care for those designs. But I like the patterns that they come out in, and I think a couple of them like take more than one hit. So like there is some variety there. I think you guys are saying the same thing.
Yeah. Because I specifically remember one that stood out to me where. I'm trying to remember. It's like they come at you and they foul you, they track you, but then once you shoot them, they become like static obstacles that just move back and forth horizontally. So it's like you can't kill them. They'll be obstacles, but you want to shoot them into this easier state to avoid. I thought that was just an interesting, unique thing.
I had a question about one of the enemies. Not enemies, but one of the destructible scenery, I guess. Sure. There's 2 eyes at the end of every level. What's up with them? Does anything happen if you get both of them? Or
apparently, if you kill them both at the same time, you get 80,000 points. That's the only thing about them.
Wow.
It's a point thing, and that's like how most of these games were built anyway.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, like the arcade versions of these games were something that was designed for like the Japanese arcades where kids would go after school and there'd be like a whole selection of these different shmups, in cabinets and stuff like that. And your whole goal for that, until cram school essentially was just to beat the new high score and make your claim. So I think like this kind of repetitiveness in a way is really exciting for that group of people, but we're not like, even if we were the biggest shmup fans, we still have to review these games based on like their actual gameplay value to the NES, not just to like this one particular genre and this like high score mechanic of it. So I could understand why sometimes these things take off in the sense of, oh, well, this one actually has great patterns, or this one has really cool power-ups that help you get through things. It's like, I can see how that's big for that scene, but it's not like necessarily a big revelation for the actual game in the scope of people who are buying this for the NES as like just to play alongside their other games. Which will bring me to my final question for you guys based on this game. And it's actually just for all shmups in general. How fair does this genre need to be for you personally? Like, is it okay that these games are hard? Or do you think that there should be a balance in the sense that the games should be beatable at all times? Like, they should play test it so that everybody could theoretically make it to the end of a shmup. Joe, what do you think?
Well, if we're talking just for me personally, I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by fair, but I think pretty darn fair is what I require. I mean, the kind of thing where too many projectiles are coming at you that it, like you get very easily trapped into situations where you just can't get out because there's no spot and you have to like luck your way through things like that. I don't find acceptable. But I'm part of this is also like just for me. I want a shmup to be a little easier than I'm sure someone who's a seasoned shmup vet would disagree and would want something that's like a high challenge. But as far as like fairness, I do always want them to have paid really close attention to enemy placement or just patterns to make sure that it's always like doable.
I guess, just to rephrase my question for you, Joe, which I think you gave a fine answer to, should this genre, not what it currently is, but should this genre be strictly a contest of skill, or should they be designed like how most video games are designed, in the sense of like there's a set amount of stages and there's a logical path to beating them as long as you play appropriately,
Gotcha.
I would say that Super Mario Brothers is not a game that everybody gets to World 8-4 and beats Bowser, right? But it's totally possible, and I would say that a good amount of NES gamers have done that. But Nintendo didn't make that an easy game per se. So I guess that's what I mean by like fairness. Is
okay,
like, are you looking for that when you play these games, or do you recognize it as just a contest of skill?
With that context to the question, I do think that maybe I do think that the essence of a shmup is supposed to be like to test your skill. I think that that's what they want. It's not for me, but like I think that that's what makes a shmup most of the time. So I do think that that's kind of an important element of shmups.
Yeah, I think that I think you're sort of asking the same question, like with this either or thing. I mean, it's if you need to display your skill in order to do this, but if you try and like learn the game, you will eventually do that. Like anybody can beat this game, and I guess like what a part of your question that I can answer is whether I prefer like brute force memorization and twitch reflexes, or whether I prefer like systems mastery. And if I phrase your question in that way, I would prefer systems mastery, where like you need to practice the game and understand like how you play the game at the most base level, but I don't think that it would be best for it to just keep exponentially getting like faster and busier, because I just think that that's kind of a lazy way to do difficulty. Is that sort of in the same realm of what
I think that's a very thoughtful response. Yeah, okay. I like that. Sam, any other things to add?
I'm kind of in the same position as Joe, where this isn't really my genre of choice for games, so I would like them in general just to be a little bit more beginner friendly, just for my own sake. But I also understand that these games specifically are those kind of games where you need to get used to how it plays and you need to get the reflexes, and having all that is part of the game. And I agree with what Sean said, that it should be systems based, where once you really know the game inside and out, not just where enemies are going to be, but how to interact with the game itself, like the world in the game.
Yeah,
I think that is a good place for shmups to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree. I agree with that as well. I think you guys had some great answers for a very vague question, and to be fair, there was no right answer. I think some people would tell you that, you know, video games peaked in the early 80s with these arcade formats, and it was all about high scores, and that skill is really like the most fun part. I mean, you see that even in speedrunning today, right? That is all about skill. Like, there's no room for mistakes or errors and stuff like that. And I do think, Sam, you were talking about Cadence of Hyrule last week, I think, right? And that's another game where, you know, you can't really make a ton of mistakes, and it punishes you immediately for making mistakes, but you get tries over and over again. In the same sense, like, shmups are like that, you know? They are not necessarily designed to be beaten. They're designed to see how far you can go.
Yeah.
So I'm going to add some development insight from Takahashi Maijin, a former Hudson Soft executive, and Hudson Software are the makers of this game. He actually has some pretty interesting quotes here, Sean. So
wow,
not the normal stuff. He doesn't shy away from it, because this is a guy who pretty much always was around the shmup scene, which in Japan they call them STGs. I'm not quite sure what that stands for. But shooting themed games, who knows?
That sounds about as good as it can be. So
right. So they call it STGs over there, but he's been around that his whole life, and when he retired, he was kind of like, yeah, these STGs nowadays suck. It's all about the older stuff. And an interviewer pressed him about some of these questions. So here's what he had to say. On calling shmups dodging games, he says, yeah, it seems strange to just call them all shooting games. They probably want to say that, oh, it's easy to dodge since the hitbox is so small. But I think that to the average person, it looks impossible. And that has led to a great decline in the number of STG players. Would you agree with that sentiment? That, you know, like if you look at modern shmups, I don't know if any of you guys have seen like Ikaruga or stuff like that. Would you like not even try those games because they are just bullet hells that look ridiculous? And yes, you have tons of power-ups and ammunition and barriers at your fingertips, but so do the enemies.
No, I prefer to play those games because they seem to have more going on than what Hudson Soft has showed us in these couple entries.
And here's his thought on scoring. He says, to make Lazaro, who's in Star Soldier, appear, you had to be able to tap 16 times in 1 second. So we had scoring tricks too, but they weren't essential to the game. It was just, if you want to score high, you'll need to do this. But you shouldn't have to pay attention to scoring to enjoy a game. Just surviving and progressing through the stage, enjoying that feeling of, I'm doing good, I'm shooting them all down. STG doesn't have to mean aiming for a high score. Kind of goes against what I was talking about just a few minutes ago, right?
No, I mean, I agree with that assessment because we're a very anti-scoring crowd here. So no, I mean, so I very much disagree with his first point, but I agree with that one.
Yeah, it makes sense, actually. I mean, I never really thought about it from, like, the perspective of the developer, because it does seem like most of these developers put so much emphasis on scoring, including, in this game. But not, when I think about it, you're right. You can totally just do what we are doing, and I'm sure they had that in mind of just ignoring the score. But then, certain things like Sander, something you were talking about earlier, the eyes, like, won't mean anything to us because it doesn't matter if you shoot them, because who cares about the points?
And then one more from Takahashi. He says on players here, that was because the basics were all still there. STGs are the simplest kind of games to make, so it's not as if they'll ever completely vanish, but unfortunately, it's no longer a genre that the masses care much about. The impression most people have is that this is a genre of games only people with skills can play.
I
don't think he's wrong in that assessment.
Well, I mean, I guess the similarities between his opinion on this comment as opposed to his first one, he's saying that, like, the whole genre has sort of fallen by the wayside here, and he is right in that assessment. It's a very niche thing, but I think he's sort of acting like one of those guys that, like, if they were all just purists, everything would still be in the heyday. And I don't think that just because a genre has fallen into kind of the into more of like a niche market like that doesn't mean that they're any worse. I mean, that just because they got more, the people that are interested in them are really interested in them now. I guess I've sort of lost my point, but
no, I hear what you're saying though.
Yeah.
To maybe pick up at least where I think you might have been going was that I feel like, if anything, that could make these games better, because it allows the developers to focus on what those people want. So, instead of focusing on what's everybody going to love, what's going to be appeal to a broad audience, like, they can get very specific about the things that people who play shmups like, and they can continue to build on those things.
That's what Pokemon fans have been wanting for a long time, is like, stop appealing to the broad player base and just like, I play this Pokemon game for 20 years, give me some respect. But yeah, that's I think what you were getting at as well, Sean. I don't know if you quite finished the thought there, but like, it's strange that he's asking for games to go back to like Star Soldier levels of shoot 'em up, where it's like, things used to be a little more simple. It used to be more just about shooting the enemies and dodging, and now they've added all this flashiness, and it's become really hardcore, and there's too many power-ups and too many different types of enemies and too many stages.
It sounds very crotchety to me.
Right. It's like, I don't know if I'd want to go back to this.
Yeah.
As I don't know, the games are too fun now.
Yeah.
They got all this cool, interesting stuff in them. Well,
it'd be like if people told Naughty Dog, like, stay away from The Last of Us and go back to Crash Bandicoot, right?
Yeah.
Like, all right, sequels and spin-offs time for Star Soldier. Apparently there is like an additional NES game in this loosely connected now trilogy of games, where we had Star Force, then we have Star Soldier right now. Apparently in 1990, we're going to get Starship Hector, which sounds ridiculous as a title, but is going to be part of the Star trilogy of NES games. So as long as it has Star in the title, it's technically part of this, I suppose. Yeah,
we'll get Star Wars eventually.
Dan?
Yeah, it's just weird, right? Starship Hector is like, it's just not really like a climactic name or an exciting name. Like, I feel like only people named Hector would buy that.
I'm looking at the like title screen of it right now, and it's just a giant like epic like block text of just says Hector.
Starship
Which is
Travis.
great. Yeah.
Starship Raoul.
Everybody got a personalized copy. It's like when Coke did that, like, share a Coke with Sean, right? It's like, Starship Sean, coming to you if you buy it.
I'd love that.
Yeah, you go into, like, the gift shop and you see, like, that shelf full of, like, all the most common names that all Starship so-and-so.
Yeah. Well, and gift shop for Busch Gardens and Disneyland and all that shit.
Keep an eye out for Starship Bort when
Bort.
Bort. Yeah, Bort. Bort's like a very popular name.
I love Bort.
Yeah. All right, so you guys know my whole process of like this year, 1989 is different. I'm actually going to play all the sequels and spin-offs whenever possible for these games. So I went through the Star Soldier line and also played a few other ones, mostly on the TurboGrafx 16. But this was actually a really exciting series that got better with almost every single entry. So I'd love to talk about it if you'll humor me.
Please.
All right. After Star Soldier, we got Super Star Soldier on the TurboGrafx 16 in 1990, the first official sequel to Star Soldier. This one has a weird mechanic where the power-ups still just kind of float on screen and you can collect them, and they just progress the same linear fashion. But now there's different colors. So there's red power-ups, green power-ups, and blue power-ups. And if you're on the red chain, right, like let's say you've collected 3 reds, if you collect a blue, even by accident, now you get reset all the way back to the beginning of Blue's line of power-ups. So you also have to, besides dodging enemies, you have to dodge power-ups in Super Star Soldier.
Okay.
I like that.
Sounds cool.
Then Final Soldier, which only came out in Japan, but it's a shmup, so I didn't need to know any Japanese to play the game. This one I really liked a lot, and there's still the usual 4 weapons, 4 power-ups from Super Star Soldier, but this time you can actually designate which attacks you want to use in the menus section before you start the game. So you actually choose your loadout to be like, okay, well, blue power-ups are this type of power-up. Green power-ups are this type of power-up. And so there's actually 12 different weapons that you can choose to your disposal for almost like an infinite amount of combos. And I really enjoyed this one. It's very flashy. It's probably stuff that Takahashi either did work on, so he's proud of it, or was against it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, who can tell?
It sounds like they kind of found their way.
But I really liked Final Soldier, so if anybody's into the PC Engine scene and is looking for a great shmup, Final Soldier is going to get my recommendation. And then Soldier Blade came out back to US in 1992 for the TurboGrafx 16. And in this one, it's pretty much similar to Super Star Soldier, except for now you get a little robot buddy who's always there. He just hangs out with you. He helps take care of business. He can unleash some power-ups. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool guy.
Okay. I don't really know what that means, but I'll play it myself, I guess.
Imagine an indestructible ship, right?
He takes
that also
care of
just
business.
hangs out with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you shoot, but he also does stuff.
Okay. All right, I get that.
I think that one also had a thing where that chain of colored power-ups changes. So now as you collect them, the 3 most recent ones that you've collected are hanging out at the bottom of the screen. Think of that as part of your UI.
Yeah.
And you can actually press let's say the B button, whatever that is on a TurboGrafx 16. You can press that and it releases an ultimate attack, but you now give up that power up in exchange.
Okay.
So I thought that was a neat balance of you might have a level 3 power up, but you have a really tough enemy in front of you, so you have to sacrifice your level 3 power up for a stronger one-shot
That's
attack.
cool.
Yeah, these sound good on paper, Mike.
Thank you. Star Parodier for the PC Engine Super CD, I was not able to play because this is a Japanese-only hardware thing where it's disc-based. Think Sega CD, but for the TurboGrafx, but only in Japan. And this is where our boy Bomberman comes back into play. You can play as Bomberman as a ship in a Star Parodier hilarious style shmup. It's really funny. It reminds me of Stinger with its graphics, crazy enemies, and Bomberman's in it. So why not?
Bomberman is the ship?
Bomberman is one of the ships. The other one is Caesar, and the third one is just a gigantic version of the PC Engine CD.
Wow. Okay.
With a copy of Superstar Soldier in the card slot.
I can't visualize this at all, but it sounds like fun.
We already have the graphics card in this one, so
Yeah.
Right. I think it's nice that they included a copy of Superstar Soldier though in their ship version of their gigantic PC engine. Somehow it got onto the N64 and became like maybe the only shmup on that system. If you don't think, I don't think of Star Fox 64 as a shmup for some reason. I think of that as just like a great game. That's just like
it's not a shmup.
Own, like,
yeah,
it's like
needs to be two-dimensional
on rails.
Yeah,
right?
It needs to be two-dimensional.
Yeah, but what do they call it? Rail shooters, right? That's what they are.
Yeah.
What about Star Wars Rogue Squadron?
It's got to be a
it's
rail
not
shooter,
on
right?
rails.
Oh shoot!
Then it's not a shmup.
So
Nope.
It's not a shmup then either, though. It's a 3D adventure game. No, that's not true because 3D
It's
adventure
an
games usually,
arcade
like,
flight sim.
Yeah. There you go. I like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Star Soldier Vanishing Earth came to the N64. Star Soldier finally goes 3D. The view has changed to an overhead angle perspective, and I'm not a fan of it at all. I thought it was kind of weird. You know, like most N64 games. Look at those things now. They're pretty weird looking. Same thing with PlayStation 1 games.
No, we're not getting into this conversation again.
Star Soldier then got like named Star Soldier again. Like they went back to basics. And it came out on GameCube, PS2, and PSP in 2003. They developed a 3D remake of the original Star Soldier for GameCube and all that jazz. So it's just that in 2.5D, if you will, or 3D, however you want to imagine it. Star Soldier R, Hudson and Konami, finally, the two shmup giants merged together to make an homage to the beginning of Star Soldier with Star Soldier R. I don't even know when this came out, but it did, and nobody cared. No fanfare whatsoever for this one. So it's supposed to be after Konami started making pachinko machines.
Makes sense.
So would you try Star Soldier now, knowing that like it evolves into this big grand series?
But we already tried it.
No. Would you try like the rest of it?
I might like pick one of them. Like I'm not
dabble.
Yeah, dab. I'm not gonna play all of them, unless I need to because of the podcast.
No, it's fine. Actually, it's a good point that you mentioned that because we don't care at all about these other games, actually. We only care about one game, and it's the game that's the name of the episode, and that's Star Soldier. And we care about it so much that we're actually going to review it right now on a little thing we call the Essential Games List. And it's time for the Essential Games List, as I just mentioned 5 seconds ago. It's just a short little jingle. Who knows? Maybe Sam will give us like a new version of the Essential Games List sometime. He makes all the music that you hear on this show, except for the ones that are from the video game. But like, come on, you know the difference. Like, you can tell the difference from which ones because Sam's are just higher fidelity.
Yeah.
So, Sam, since we're putting you on the spotlight here, why don't you also tell us your thoughts on Star Soldier? And maybe, I don't even remember. Was there music in this game? Did it suck? Was that a thing?
I don't remember any music.
There is music. And it doesn't suck, but it's also not memorable.
And I think that is a great analogy for the rest of the game. I think that this game is a shmup on the NES, and that's about it. It's really bare bones. It is successful in being a very bare bones shmup, I guess. Like it's not like it's difficult to control or unfair in any kind of way, but I mean, I guess the brain stuff at the end of each level, sending you back to the beginning, is kind of unfair, but that's, I guess, an opinion. But it doesn't really bring anything interesting to the table. It's just a very, very standard shmup, and so I would say not essential. Not
essential. You heard it here first. Sam, I do like the idea, though, that we have to also figure out if these games belong in their own genres. Like, you said it's a shmup, so it does make that category, but, like, imagine if next week with Tecmo Baseball, we have to be like... not a baseball game. Like, you have to actually be like, turns out, not a baseball game.
More of a
like,
shmup.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, more of a shmup. That would be interesting, a shmup baseball game. We're not talking about that, though. Joe, please tell me your thoughts on whether Star Soldier is an essential game or not.
I'm not going to say much because I really don't think that there is a better description of this game than... I forgot the description. Oh, my God. Then, what did you say?
It's a shmup on the shmup. NES?
It's not... No, it doesn't suck, but it's not memorable. Sorry, I don't know why I forgot that. I was thinking about it ever since it was said.
Yes, that is
I think
what
that
I
is
said
the
about the music.
Perfect.
Yes.
That is the perfect explanation, though. I mean, I don't think it gets any better than that. It's just, it's a middle of the road at best shmup. So no, not essential. Shmup on the NES, by the way. If we're talking shmups altogether, I'm sure it's much lower than middle of the road.
Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to continue to rephrase the basic conceit of what we've been saying. It is completely serviceable. It is functional, but it is so goddamn boring. I could have kept playing this game, but I didn't. It is not essential.
What a beautiful phrase there at the end. I could have kept playing this game, but I didn't. I think we've only run into that kind of scenario a few times on this show. Oftentimes, we aren't interested enough to continue playing, but never have we said, like, I could keep going, but nothing, I'm guaranteeing that nothing else is going to happen.
Kind of like Lunar Pool.
Right. Nothing's stopping me from playing more Lunar Pool except for myself. Yeah. And I think that's where I kind of land on my vote for Star Soldier here, is that I'm pretty sure when I told you guys, like, hey, this is loosely connected to Star Force, no one knew what I was talking about.
Yeah,
and you all had to go back and you had to go back and play Star Force to remember it. You know, you might have remembered that it's a shmup because you knew that this one was a shmup, but I doubt that you remembered like the ins and outs of Star Force. And that's how it's going to wind up for Star Soldier here. This is a game that in 30 to 40 episodes, we will have a tough time name dropping this one on the show. Which is scary because Sam had a tough time name dropping Life Force, the best shmup on the system so far in this very episode.
Life Force, Star Force, you know, it's tricky. All I'll say is it's no Scoon.
It's no Scoon.
That's the scoop. That will be in the Sunday paper. Sam Smith, no Scoon. Read it big. Anyway, as I mentioned earlier in the Essential Games list, next week is Tecmo Baseball. Guys, did you even know they made more than Tecmo Bowl?
I mean, I knew that they made more than Tecmo Bowl, but not baseball.
Well, we'll be looking forward to playing it, and maybe, who knows, this will be the 5th baseball game we play on this system.
Let's fucking
and
go.
Sean's just really like, where's the football at?
Yeah, where's the football?
We've only had one.
I know, I want more.
But I heard a rumor that Tecmo's going to make a football game for you, maybe even 2. So that could be good or bad. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
Joe, thoughts on baseball?
I like baseball. Baseball is a good sport.
But is it haunted?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Sam, baseball, haunted, Angels in the outfield?
Yeah, it's a given. It's haunted on more than one occasion.
Great. I mean, if you build it, they will come. That's like a ghost line if I've ever heard one. Anyway, the show is Nostalgia. You can talk to us at NostalgiaCast on Twitter. I'm Michael Esposito. You can find me at Esposito Film on Twitter. And we'll be talking to you next week all about Tecmo Baseball, maybe just in time for spring training if they haven't like moved it or canceled it, but who knows? Who can say? We'll say. That's for sure.